Okay, the next speaker is actually a woman, as you can see. And there's something very special about her. It was her birthday yesterday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday to you. You are awesome. Okay, another very important point about her is she has this so winning smile that everyone, when I see her, I was, okay, this day will gonna be awesome. And she did her master thesis this year, earlier this year, a few months ago, about progressive web apps, right?
Yes, that's true.
Welcome on stage, Marta.
Woo! Hola, Angie Spain. Can you hear me? Can you see my slides? No? Cool. So it means that we can start. So hello, everyone. My name is Marta. I'm from Poland. And today I will be talking about a totally great topic. This is offline first in Angular. And before I start my session, I have a question for you. So how many of you have ever heard about progressive web apps? Great. So it means that you don't need introduction. I can skip some of my slides. That's amazing. Cool. And the second question is whoever built PWA? Cool. Maybe in Angular? Yes, good answer. So this is a good conference. Yeah, so when you're using Angular, it's very easy to create your basic PWA because you can apply the only one command. This is ng add Angular PWA, and you will generate basic files that are required for creating progressive web app. And it's very easy typically when you have static data in your app because you can easily cache your network resources. But the more difficult is when you have more interaction between the client and server. And the character of your data is the main factor that tells you is it worth it to progressively enhance your app into progressive web apps. And today I want to focus on managing data in your app. I will tell you how you can store it locally on the front-end side and synchronize it with the backend automatically. So now let me introduce myself. So my name is Marta, I'm from Poland. I live in Warsaw, and I'm a huge fan of progressive web apps. And my journey with PWA started over 1 year ago when I was writing my master's thesis. In my thesis, I compared progressive web apps and hybrid apps. And then I also started co-creating open source project called PWA Fire. In this project, me and my colleague from Kenya, what is really interesting, we create open source resources, code labs, and tools that allows you to create PWA easier and with best practices for web. And I work for a company called ePoint. This is a software house that is mainly focused on financial and e-commerce sector. And e-commerce, this is an area where you can find a lot of use cases of PWA. And I'm also a huge fan of community. I'm organizer of Women Techmakers Warsaw and Google Developers Group Warsaw. So if you have never heard about these groups, maybe you want to join to this group in your city, you can ping me after the presentation. I would love to help you. And I love Latin music. And I know Spanish language only from these Spanish songs. For example, Hasta Cuando, Con Calma, or I don't know, Despacito, and stuff like that. And I'm really excited because my company is on a global list as a PWA agency recognized by Google. And now I'm working on a project when you're using Angular and Spartacus. And Spartacus is a storefront for e-commerce, also written in Angular with ready-to-use components for e-commerce. And this is the plan for us for today. So at the beginning, I will tell you what is in general offline first. I will show you advantages of this approach, the golden rules. Then I will tell you about offline storages, how you can use local storage to store data locally. After that, we will switch focus to the PouchDB. This is a wrapper for index database. Next, I will show you app shell model. This is a great way to improve performance of your app. And I will show you how you can automate it with Angular CLI. And the last point will be about examples of offline first apps. And today my goal is to help you understand your offline first approach. But my second goal is to show you how a huge impact developers have on human lives. Because maybe a lot of time you feel like the frog from this picture, that something happens too many times to you, again and again, and regardless of what you do. Do you know this? And maybe sometimes it's not too bad, but then it is, and you feel totally unstable, dangerously unstable, like, I don't know, like this. Or maybe sometimes even a simple, small things totally frustrate you, like typically small, moving, circle, loading things, right? Do you know this? It's a pain, right? Yeah. So as you can see, stress and negative energy is a big problem today. And a bunch of scientists was working on human brains, and they were trying to find solution how to make people happier. And it was totally surprising because they discovered that the only one way to make people happier is to create fast and stable apps and use offline first. So what is offline first? So it means that being offline should not be an error condition. And I suppose that you already know that, but maybe not from web apps, but typically from native apps or desktop apps. When you're using Spotify, the mobile version, and you're offline, you're not able to track music, but you're still able to edit playlists, do stuff like that. And when you have internet access again, then all your data is synchronized with all your clients. So it's very cool. And the other case, for example, Slack, desktop version, if you're offline, you're not able to send message, but your app's still working, and you're informed about the network state, about the state of the app. So it's very cool. And what we do in web apps is that we store our data locally on the front-end side, we cache it and show that to the user, and at certain times we synchronize with the backend and fetch new data and store new data. And from developer's perspective, you should write just your app as it has no internet connection. And I really compare it with mobile first. So in mobile first, you start implementation for small screens, and then you can enhance it for bigger. So in this case, you need to write app that works in offline state, and then you can make it more powerful, add more features, but you need to make sure that your app works when you're offline. And it's really important to remember that it probably will not work the same way, right? Because it's impossible. Sometimes it is when you have only static resources, but typically not. But we try to add as many features as we can at this offline state. And there's a lot of advantages of this approach. And the first one is quite obvious, that you can actually build apps that are being able to work offline. But there's more. For example, you can create faster user interfaces, because all your CRUD operations are moved locally on your device. And you can, for example, store separated user interface of your app from its data. You can apply optional model, which is really cool because of performance of your app. And you don't need to wait on server response, because you can get some resources from cache. So it's very fast. From other perspective, it's good because of user experience, because your user can still use this app, and you can inform about the network state, about the state of app. And the last point is about batch network requests periodically versus all the time, so you can save bandwidth and also improve battery life. And there are golden rules of offline first approach. So the first one is that we should use local data whenever it's possible. And you can use XML HTTP request to get your network resources and store it locally. And today I will show you possibilities to do it in offline storages. And the second part is about storing separated user interface of your app from its data. And I suppose that if you're not familiar with PWA and offline first, you already do this in your app, because it's just easier to manage your data and your logic in your app. And the next point is about storing the state of your app to allow your user to pick up wherever he left off. And the next point about testing, you need to make sure that your app works properly for both for common and tricky scenario. And sometimes maybe it's not easy to test your progressive web app, but it's really important to remember about this point. So now let's talk about offline storages, because I think it's a key point to understand the offline first. So here you can see a list of basic web storages. And I think that you already know that, and you use it in your apps. So session storage and local storage are separated storage areas that allows you to store data in your browser. And session storage is possible to use for the duration of page session, but local storage is possible to use even if you close and reopen your browser. And they're really common, but have downsides. Like, for example, they are asynchronous, so they can block your app. They don't have support for web worker. And you need to serialize and deserialize data, because you can store only strings in these storages. And the last one is WebSQL. So this is asynchronous, so it's based on callbacks. So it's a little bit better, but it also doesn't have support for web worker. So these are alternatives. So they support web workers, but File System API doesn't have much power outside of Chrome, and it's sandboxed, what means that you can't get native file access. File API is a little bit better because of browser support, but typically in web apps, in progressive web apps, we use index database and cache API. And index database, this is document database where you can store pairs of key and value, and you can store different types of data. It could be blobs, JSONs, and so on. And it's really good because you can use it everywhere because of good support for browsers. Cache API was created to catch your network resources and cache it, and it can store pairs of key and value that represents HTTP requests and HTTP responses that can contain any kind of data that can be transferred over HTTP. And what we do in general in offline first is that all resources that are required to load your app while offline we store in Cache API, but for other resources we use the index database. And for some cases, index database can be complex to use, and you have more developer-friendly solutions. So there are just JavaScript libraries that are wrappers for index database. And today I will focus on PouchDB, but you can see more options like Dexy.js, JSTore, or local forage. And every browser has its own storage limit, and here you can see these limits. And typically it's set per origin, and it depends on the disk space for Chrome and Firefox. For Edge, it depends on volume size, but sometimes it's set just a value. And for Safari, here you can see an example for mobile version, but for desktop it's unlimited, but I've never checked it, so you can just try it. And I highly recommend you to visit this tab, the Chrome tools, and just to check for existing progressive webs how it works, what they can store. And this is an example of Twitter because they use a lot of different storages. So yeah, I think it would be really helpful for you to understand how to use these storages for your app. And now let's talk about PouchDB. So PouchDB is open source JavaScript library that allows you to store data locally and synchronize with the backend automatically. And it's very cool because you can use it everywhere where JavaScript runs. So it's possible to use in your web apps, but also, for example, for hybrid apps, desktop apps, and any Node.js app. And this is how you can structure your Angular app with PouchDB. And this is an example with CouchDB. And CouchDB is a document database that is very similar to MongoDB. And in CouchDB, we will store data remotely, but in PouchDB, locally. So we will create local database. Then we need to replicate it. So we need to hook it up for replication. And it's very cool because if everything changes on the backend side, then we'll push changes automatically to the front-end side. And we need to subscribe it and react in a proper way. So now, let's have a look how we can do it in your Angular app. So at the beginning, we need to cache some resources, as I said before. So all resources that are necessary to load your app while it's offline. So for me, the easiest way is just apply this command in CLI. This is ng-add Angular PWA. So even if you apply it, run in your app, then you will see basic files, default files generated by Angular. And even if you build it and deploy it on a remote server, then your app will work offline. So even if you don't need any customize, and yeah, it really works. So the second step is just to apply index database to, let's say, manage this dynamic data, this network requests. And this is how you can do it. So it's just Node.js module. So you can install PouchDB or just PouchDB browser module. And it's just a small package for only browsers. And you don't need to install any dependencies that if you don't need to use it outside of browser. The second step is installation of PouchDB server, as you can see before, and serving this local data in your local environment. And if you wanted to use it in your app, you need to import it in this way. Then we need to create local database, as in this example. Next step is about hook it up with replication. So you need to add remote database and customize the type of synchronization. And here you can see an example for bidirectional synchronization. The next step is about implementation of CRUD operations. So as usual, you can see like in HTTP requests. And then we need to subscribe and react in proper way. Sorry for forbidden word. But yeah. And now I'm going to focus on the app shell model, because this is a great way to improve the performance of your app. And the app shell model is just a way to render a portion of your app via a route at building time. And it's a great way to improve the performance of your app, and especially on repeat visits. And from practical perspective, this is just the minimal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that is required to power the user interface of your app. And on the right side, you can see an example. So that there are just the parts of your app that are common to all pages. And now we can use this command in CLI to generate app shell. So we need to add two properties. The first one is client project name, and the second is universal project name. So this is just the name of your server or universal project. And the next step is building process. So it depends on environment. So for the production, you need to apply the second command. And if you generate your app shell, then you will see updates typically in Angular JSON file. You will see two additional targets. And I did experiment. I built simple Angular app. Then I added the app shell model. And I compared it based on test and refreshing the same apps 10 times. And here you can see the visual effect. And on the right side, you have the app with app shell. So as you can see, you even don't know that the user refreshed your page, because you get this view very quickly. And there are results of performance tests. So here you can see 5 metrics: the load time, first byte, start render time, first contentful paint, and speed index for this, the same app with app shell and without. So as you can see, the values for these metrics in every case is lower, over 20%. So this is what you can achieve with the app shell. And now I want to show you examples, apps that we're creating offline first and with PouchDB. So this is Hospitaron. It's very cool. So this is open source app for developing world hospitals. So you can take it into areas where you don't have internet access at all. You can collect healthcare data. And when you come back to the place when you have internet access, for example, the hospital, then your data will be synchronized with all your clients. So it's very cool. And this is open source, so you can find the code of this app on GitHub. The second is Cozy Cloud. So this is for more personal usages. So you can use it to synchronize your contacts, calendar, files, and share between your server, between your devices. And Financier, to store data about your budget. It also was built with this offline first approach and with PouchDB. And it's very cool when you wanted to use it to apps, when you will use the same device, because you can just use this internal storage, but also can synchronize with all your clients. And this is my last slide, and I want to sum up some things. So today I told you about offline first. I showed you the examples, and I told you about golden rules, how to apply in Angular app. And remember that you don't need to use this raw index database. You can use just more developer-friendly solutions like PouchDB. And remember that offline first is not only about creating apps that work offline, but it's a great way to create fast and stable apps and save the world from sadness and from pain, right? And I want to invite you to PWA and offline first communities. So here you can see the links to Slack spaces, where you can ask questions and find people that works also with PWA. And if you want to keep in touch with PWA, just follow PWA Fire. And if you have any questions, you can ping me on Twitter and after this presentation. This is a great book about PWA in Angular, so you can also win it today. And yeah, there are my slides, and thanks for having me. It was awesome to be here.